I am with Kansas State University. It's not hard to figure that out. Everywhere I end up in meetings, some folks are thinking I'm wearing the same shirt every day. I assure you I change shirts every day, but they're all the same color. They're all purple, so that does not change. We did not fare very well in our bowl game if you watched the Alamo Bowl, and I just got an email this morning from Coach Snyder. He sent out an email to all the faculty apologizing for their poor performance. My problem is I remember the days when we went 3 years and never won a game. And so 9 wins doesn't sound so bad to me, but you know, expectations move up. 9's no longer good enough. Nebraska fires them with 9 wins. So I got news for Nebraska. It's a lot harder to win a national championship than you think it is. So, but nonetheless, that is their fan base. One of the things, usually I have ag managers plastered everywhere. This is our website, and it's our backup source of information for people that want more than what they get out of the meeting. I usually have it all over my handout material. Turns out I only got it in one spot in this set of handouts you have, and that's where it's at. So I will reference this website, and if you want to find it later, I had somebody come up in the meeting and ask me, where is your site? Well, I thought I had it written everywhere, but I don't. The first thing in the farm program is you're allowed to update your program or payment yield, or what they call the CC program yield. You got a letter from FSA telling you what your current CC yield is. Everybody remember getting that letter? You can go in based on your yields from 08 through 12, enter that data, and if you come up with a higher yield, then you can elect to take that higher yield, and of course you want to do that. I can't think of any reason you would not want to take the higher yield. So if you haven't done this, I would certainly encourage you to do it, even if you're going to do a program that doesn't require the program yield. For example, the ARC doesn't use the program yield, but the PLC does use the program yield. So with that in mind, a little bit of static there. I certainly would encourage you to update the yield. No, I'm plugged in. I would encourage you to do this. The reason is the last time you could update that payment yield was in 2002. And if you remember, in 2002, you couldn't update the payment yield unless you reallocated your base acres. This time around, those decisions are independent. You can reallocate your base and not update your payment yield. You can update your payment yield and not reallocate the base, or you can do both or neither. Now, if you get a higher yield, then there's no reason not to do it, because it will go with the land. So if the land should, and it may be another 15 years before they allow you to update those yields again. So I would certainly think you would want to do it. We don't know what the next farm bill is going to look like. And you may want that program yield when we get to the next farm bill, depending on how it's designed. And therefore, there's no reason not to update it. You have until the end of February. February the 27th is the final date. But you're not going to get any more information between now and then on this issue. And I would certainly encourage you to at least check and see if you can prove a higher yield. Now, if you can't prove a higher yield, I'll get to you. If you can't prove a higher yield, then you would accept what you already have. Yes, sir?
I was told yesterday that FSA offices have access to the yield information. Is that correct?
From RMA?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. The RMA data is by unit, which could be optional units or basic units. And whereas with FSA, you have a farm serial number, you may have several units, insurance units, on that one farm serial number. So you're going to have to weight average the yield that you assign to that farm service number. So it's not quite as easy as it sounds like it should be. You're going to have to take yields from each unit, and they're by legal description. And then you can get into cases where you've got a unit that's in 2 separate farm serial numbers. You know, one of them is part of the land is in this is in a different unit as far as insurance is concerned, but it's in the same farm serial number. You got things crossing lines and that sort of thing. So as a general statement, yes. And you can use your crop insurance records, and that's true. You go in and update your payment yields. They basically just take your word for it. It is subject to audit. So you want to keep whatever records you use to turn in that number. Because 3 years down the road, FSA can't audit the records, and you'd want to show what you used for data to come up with that number. Okay? On the reallocation of acres, in most cases, I think most farmers would want to move to corn. Don't know if that's true in every case, but that's probably what most farmers would like to move base acres to if they can. Now, you can't just go to FSA and say, I've looked at the program, I think corn's got the best deal, and I want to move all my base to corn. The only acres you can move to corn is based on what you planted through 9 through 12. Now, prices were pretty high during that period of time, so a lot of you planted more corn than soybeans. In other words, you upped the corn plantings from what you normally have done. And as a result, you may well be able to increase the corn acres, but you won't be able to, say, move all the acres to corn and reduce soybeans and oats and some other things that might still be out there. So that's something you would certainly want to look into. You can't do a partial thing either. In other words, I could move 100 acres of base from soybeans to corn, but I only want to move 50. No, it's all or none. You either move to the new allocation or you stay with the existing allocation. But that, yes, sir.
If you update your base acres, do they get averaged on the whole farm number, or does it still stay farm per farm?
It gets averaged for the farm serial number. So it's strictly that farm serial number that you're dealing with. Whatever the average works out to be, it may be coming from several insurance units that's creating that average for that farm serial number, right?
The farm serial number can have several different tracks.
Yes, it could. It could, yeah. Okay, I would suggest you go ahead and do that because there's no reason to wait on it. Now, I do want to wait on making my decision on the election of programs until roughly March 1st, if I can, because we're going to have a lot more information on this program, and that's due to the way the prices are determined. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on the prices. You have choice among 3 programs. You can elect one of these. Now, the confusing thing is you're still going to have to enroll in the program, and you're going to have to enroll every year. Enrollment probably will last through about September 1st. So you're going to have plenty of time to enroll. But all that means is once you've elected a program, you're going to enroll, and you're going to enroll in whatever you elected. Whatever you elect prior to the end of March will be in place for the entire 5 years of the Farm Bill. So it's a one-time decision. And your choices are the price loss coverage to start with, and that is very much like the deficiency payment program where you had a strike target price, we now call it a reference price, and you got paid the difference between that reference price and the national average price. There's only one national average price, and that's not just for corn, but it's also true for wheat. You know, we've got spring wheat, we've got durum wheat, we've got winter wheat, we've got hard red winter wheat, soft wheat, soft white wheat, soft red wheat. I don't know what I'm missing, but still, with all those different classes of wheat, different markets, it's still simply one national average price. The other thing is you'll see in a lot of USDA written material, they say the farm price. You heard that term before, farm price? That's what they're talking about. The farm price is what they use for all these programs, and it's a USDA generated number. Okay? Our county is very similar to the acre program, if you remember that in the last farm program, except they're using county yields rather than state yields. It is, in fact, a revenue guarantee, okay? And then we've got our individual. It's very similar to this, except over here we're using your yields. Now, it's a national price, but it's your yields being used to set the guarantee and to calculate the revenue to count against the guarantee. Again, it is a revenue guarantee, and it is by farm serial number. The other thing is if you and I got it attached to PLC. That's not exactly true. The supplemental coverage, crop insurance that you can add on to your existing coverage, it's a county triggered program. It doesn't matter what happens on your farm. So it's based strictly on county numbers. But you can purchase this additional coverage, and it is crop insurance, and it's on all your acres, if the crop is not enrolled in ARC. Doesn't have to be in PLC. For example, let's say you got 100 acres of corn base, and you decide to plant, and you enroll that wheat, excuse me, let me rephrase that, sorry. Let's assume you got 100 acres of wheat base, and you enroll that farm serial number with 100% wheat base in the ARC County program. Okay? Now, you can plant anything on those acres you want to, but you're going to get the wheat payment. So you can plant alfalfa on it, you can plant corn on those wheat base acres, and you're going to get the wheat payment, whatever it is, under the under the ARC County program. Now, you plant corn on those acres. Well, those corn acres are not enrolled into ARC. And because it's not enrolled in ARC, you therefore can buy coverage under the supplemental coverage for corn, because corn's not in the ARC program. Now, if you go the individual route, then your guarantee is based on what you plant. So even though you got wheat base, you can, if you plant corn and wheat, your guarantee is going to be based on corn and wheat. In my interpretation, is you would no longer be able to add the supplemental coverage on for the corn. I don't think that's a big problem in this part of the world. In fact, many of you are already at 80% coverage and higher. And when I look at the performance and the results coming out of the national book, I'm convinced that most of you would be better off if you were at the 80 and 85 level. That is a very high level of coverage and provides a very low cost put. You won't buy a lower cost put anywhere. So when these prices drop, we start to trigger payments at that point. Okay? But it's something you might want to talk to the agent about. Okay, now, excuse me. Most of you probably thought, again, it's kind of cold out. I don't know. Minnesota standards, this is probably not bad. The sun's almost shining. I assure you it's cold for Kansas, so anyway, you probably thought, yeah, I don't really want to work out on the farm today, and your spouse might have had a bunch of honeydew jobs, and so this was a good way to get out of doing honeydew jobs by going to this important meeting, right? And you probably thought you'd come and visit with your friends and drink some coffee and waste a little time. No, I'm expecting a lot more than that. I'm expecting you to work through this worksheet. I'm going to ask you to do work. You will get a lot more out of the presentation if you do, in fact, complete the worksheet, and I encourage everyone to do that. So that's where we're going to go next. And the reason behind this is I want you to understand what's in these computer labs. There are several of them out there, one at Texas A&M University, one at the University of Illinois, and then we have one of our own, which I will talk briefly about, because when you work through all these things, there is no right answer for everybody in the county. It's going to vary from farm to farm. So you really need, in my opinion, run your analysis through one of the computer programs. But if you do that, it's all going to be black box, and you can't figure out why the answer came out the way it did. So that's why we're going to go through the calculations themselves. If you pull out that worksheet, it looks like a test. That's what I'm dealing with. And what I did is I said, well, I used the same farm through all three programs so you can compare them back. In this case, this farm has 550 acres of corn base and 400 acres of soybean base for a total of 1,000 acres. However, he plants 1,200 acres total, 800 corn, 400 from soybeans. Because again, you can plant whatever you want on the PLC program and also on the ARC County. So at this point, he's got 200 acres that have no base. If you came into this program with 200 acres with no base, you're going to leave this program with 200 acres of no base. You cannot build base, you can't add base. I've answered that question, it seems like 100 times. You cannot build base, no matter what happens. Got some CRP ground that you're bringing back into production. If that CRP ground doesn't have a base, and a lot of times they move the base to other crop acres before they put it into CRP, then it's going to come back into this program with no base. And there'll be no payment on those acres. Now, if that CRP ground does have a base, but I'm sure you'll have to live with the existing program yield because it wasn't planted. But if it does have base, you can bring it back in and it will be eligible for payments. You just won't be able to update the yield. Okay? Anyway, next item is the 170 bushel program yield that you updated prior to the end of February. Same thing with the soybeans. And then we get down to the reference price of $3.70 and $8.40 for the soybeans. Those numbers are in law, and they will not change during the life of the Farm Bill. They are absolute. They will not change. And then you're paid the difference between the reference price and the national average price, sometimes referred to as the farm price. This national average price, you will not know it until roughly the 1st of October. Why? The marketing year for corn is September 1 through August 31st. And then it takes a little time for USDA to get the data together to publish the number. So for the 2014 crop that you just harvested, you won't know the national average price until October 1st, roughly, of 2015. About, what, 9 months from now? About 9 months from now. And same thing with the soybeans. So for the purpose of this example, I'm just using the corn price of $3.60 is strictly an example. That's not a forecast of that price. We don't know it, and that's not a forecast. That's just was plugged in as an example price so that we could calculate the numbers in these worksheets. And I use $10 for soybeans. I will give you an estimate of the price when we get to that. At this point, you'll notice in red, that's the formula. And right below it is the blanks to fill in to work through the example. And we start with the first one. You have a reference price on corn of $3.70. That is the maximum price. I mean, fixed price. That price is fixed through the life of the Farm Bill. Any of you remember working with the deficiency payment? Yeah, you do that. Yeah. You remember what the target price was for deficiency payments on corn? Well, since he's recording this, I hope I'm right. But I believe it was $2.75. And how'd that work? You had this target price that's $4 on wheat. You had this target price of $2.75, and then you would calculate this same national average price that we're talking about now, and you got paid the difference between the target and the national average price. This works exactly the same way, except they renamed target price, and then we now call it reference price. Okay? So, looking at that formula and reading the formula, what is the payment rate that you would come up with if that national average price comes in at $3.60? Wow, who said that over here? You did. Bet you thought high school should have only taken 2 years. But you're only waiting on all those other guys in the class that went to football practice with no helmet, and so you end up having to take 4 years what you could do in 2. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, next question. Since I'm going to go over here, shouldn't answer the first one. So now what's the payment per acre in our example? 10 cents times your yield. And the yield you're going to use is that 170 bushels that you updated, right? Everybody agree? So it's the 10 cents times the updated yield, and we come up with $17 an acre. But you don't get paid $17 on all your acres, do you? No, wish you did, but you don't. So we got to make those adjustments. The corn payment then is the $17. That's our payment per acre. But we planted 800 acres, right? We planted 800 acres, but we only have 550 acres of base. And you get paid on your base acres, whatever they are. Whatever they are. You don't get paid on the 800 that you planted. You're only get paid on 550 times the $17, and then you're going to multiply that by the 85% factor, and that 85% number is in the law. It will not change during the life of the Farm Bill. The other thing is, that questions that came up, you don't have to plant any of that 550 acres of base acres to corn, and you're still going to get this same payment. You could even leave it unplanted, and you'd get this payment. The one thing you can't do is fruits and vegetables. They start whacking on you at that point. That question came up. That one caught me by surprise. I didn't expect that one, but that did come up yesterday. We multiply that through, and we come up with 79.47 and some change for the payment. Okay? Now, what did the soybeans pay? Nothing. How did you get there? Why do you say nothing? The cash price is higher, yes. This national average price is greater than the 840, and if you do the math, you're going to get a negative number, right? And you're probably thinking, well, that's pretty stupid. Why would that mean anything? Well, actually, there were people in Washington thought that you should carry in the negative number. And what that would do then is lower your overall payment because it would get deducted from the corn. And that's exactly how don't laugh, I'm going somewhere with this, that's exactly how the individual coverage does work. It combines all the crops on a farm serial number together. So the corn could have a loss, but the soybeans makes enough to make up the difference, and there's no payment. So under the individual coverage, they combine all the revenue together. Now the PLC, it's crop by crop, and the ARC counting is crop by crop. You can get paid on one crop, and another crop is fine. But if that one crop, corn in this case, has a loss, you would get paid. Anyway, we go through and we total it up. Let's move on to ARC counting. Very similar to the other program, we use the same data, same farm. And again, there's the formula. You get the higher of the two prices, either the marketing year average price or the reference price. And if you look in the first year, you see 355 is less than 370, so we delete that price and substitute in 370 into our data set. It's an Olympic average price, so we're going to throw out the high price and the low price. Well, it turns out the 370 is still the low price, so that gets axed. And 689 is the high price, and we axe it, leaving those three prices left, which we will total up and divide by 3. And that gets you the Olympic average price. Okay? Now, same thing on the yield side. We notice that he had an 80 bushel yield in 2012, and that's less than 70% of the T yield. So we strike that and we replace it with 190. Now, this T yield is not exactly the same thing as the crop insurance T yield, although in some cases that's exactly what it is, I'm being told. For example, on crop insurance, you have organic corn, you have organic soybeans, you have high lysine corn. You got different classes of corn that have different T yields. With FSA, they're only going to have one yield in the county, period, for the most part. Now, there are a few counties where they have both irrigated and dryland acreage. Basically, you need to have at least 25% of the acres in another practice, such as you had 25% of the acres in irrigated, then that county would get both an irrigated and a dryland. But if there's only 10% of the acres in the county irrigated, then there'll be one blended county yield for everybody. So most of the counties are only going to have one T yield, whereas there's multiple T yields for crops. Multiple T yields. So it's not quite as straightforward as you might think. Same story here. We're going to drop the high yield, which is the 190, and the low yield, which is still the 109, and average the remaining 3 years. Do you like that price distribution and yield distribution? Well, this is what I'm talking about. What the ideal price distribution would be to have the high price in 2013. Why? Because if it's in 2013, it would be there through the entire life of the farm bill. That high price will be in the distribution all but the last year of the farm bill. But if it's in 13, it would be there for the whole period. And we like the fact the low price is in 09, because it's going to drop out right away. After 1 year, it'll be gone. Okay? Now, what about the yield side? Well, unfortunately there, we got a low yield that's going to be in that distribution, for the entire life of the farm bill except for the last year. Our low yield was in 12. And we're going to lose our best yield in the first year. Yes, sir?
Does the yield keep updating itself each year?
Yes, it's a rolling Olympic average. So next year, same thing on the price side. Next year, you're going to drop off, the old yield will drop out of the history, and then you'll redo the Olympic averaging, and they'll add the new yield in. Yes, sir?
What if you have land in 2 different counties under the same farm number?
Actually, good question. Under the ARC County, the county that's administering your farm is the county yield they will use, even if your land's in another county. Even if your land is located in another county. The county that administers your program are the county yields that's used for ARC. Now, if you go individual, it's obviously going to be the yield from wherever the land's located because it's your yield. But that's a good point to be aware of. Sometimes you gain from that if you're being administered in a county that has better land, that's where your farm's actually located. So you could actually benefit from that too. I don't think I'll hear from those folks. I'll hear from the ones who didn't benefit from it, or what I'll hear from. Anyway, we do all this, and you plug in the price of $4.46 along with the other two prices. We eliminate the high and low. When you do that, you divide by 3, you get $5.29. By the way, all of this stuff is on our website. And there is a video out there for each one of these worksheets that take you through each one of them. So if I go too fast and you miss some things or you need to review something, you can go back to Ag Manager and actually go through these calculations. The advantage with the video is that you can stop it and back it up and replay it. And of course, if you understand everything there is to know about PLC, then there's no reason to even play that one. They're broken apart in 3 separate tapes. So you pick them out, what you want to go through. Anyway, yes?
Could you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah? Oh.
I know there's, at the very top, you indicate that it uses the county yields. Just because of all the different things steps that producers are needing to do to get this program done and in place, and there's confusion about, updating or leaving the yields alone and so forth. It does make reference, it says the higher of the producer yield or 70% of the T yield. Okay?
Oh, that's a typo.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that when you make reference to the producer, you're talking about what his county, what the average is for his
Yeah,
county.
actually, I thought I cleaned all these up. That is, thank you, that is the county yield. Yeah, that is the county yield. Gosh, we've done this for 4 days now, and nobody's found it. But yes, that is the county yield. And I'm pretty sure on our tapes that is correct. As I said, the tapes have been edited, gone through, and I thought I had the most current numbers in here, but I will fix that before I get to Wichita. Yeah. Better to look stupid 100 miles from home than it is at home. So, yes, it's the higher of the county or 70% of the T yield in that county. Okay, we throw out those high prices, low prices, same thing with yield, divide by 3, you get 143. Your benchmark revenue then is the Olympic average price times the Olympic average county yield. So you simply multiply the 529 times the 143, and our benchmark revenue is $755. Actually, due to rounding, you probably will get a little bit different number than that. The 529 number wasn't rounded to 2 digits. It came out that way, but Excel tracks a whole bunch of digits beyond the 2. In any case, the next step is you can't get more than 10% of the benchmark revenue. So the benchmark revenue, we're going to move that down here in this slot right here and do the math, follow the equation there, and you're going to take 10% of 755 and you'll get $75.60. That is the maximum payment, period, regardless of what happens.
Per acre?
Per payment acre. Per payment acre. Does anybody remember what that percentage was in the acre program that we had? 25%. If this was 25%, you'd all go home right now. Deal's done. But because it's only 10%, there is a possibility, depending on what you assume on prices, where PLC could pay more. But if you didn't have this 25% stop on this thing, I don't think there's any question what you would do if you did have a 25% stop. Why didn't they leave it at 25? This was strictly a budget decision. That's all it was, okay? But this 10% stop loss is what causes this to be a more difficult decision than otherwise would be the case. Now, that's not your guarantee. Your guarantee is 86% of your expected gross revenue, which we call benchmark revenue. You plug it in there, excuse me, and you multiply 86% times the $755, and you come up with a guarantee of $650. And it's just like revenue insurance. At this point, you're going to calculate the revenue to count against it. And if the county yield is 150 bushels, and if the price is 360 that we're using in our example. Now again, you won't know that price until the 1st of October. Won't know it until the 1st of October. We're simply plugging in 360 as an example here. But your revenue count would be the 150 bushels at the county level. And when will you know that county yield for 2014? Roughly April. So about a month after sales closing, or not sales closing, a month after you have to make a decision what to elect, right? Now, there is a good chance, I think, that they might actually extend the deadline. And if they do, you're going to have a lot more information because you will have that county yield for 2014. And I will be able to pretty much tell everybody in the country what kind of payment they're looking at on the 2014 crop under this program. I've got all the county yields. I just haven't got them put up on the website yet. I got county yields for the whole country. And not only that, but you can then establish the Olympic yield for next year and start projecting for 16. Now I'm 3 years into this farm bill. So there's a lot of information you would have if we had that number ahead of time. There's also been some talk that they might do an estimate of the county yield ahead of time. All I'm telling you, that would be a really valuable piece of information to have. If they do, in fact, close this out on March 31st, and I wouldn't count on it being extended, by the way. I'd still be planning on it to be in there somewhere early March. But if they do extend it, you probably get a chance to change your mind if you get some new information that throws you a curveball, okay? Anyway, in this case, that works out to, you multiply the 150 bushels of county yield times 360. Again, we don't know that price till harvest time. We don't know the county yield till April. And that generates $540 of county revenue, not your farm, but the county revenue, and that counts against the guarantee. Our guarantee is 86% of the reference revenue, which is this number right here. We plug in the $540 worth of county revenue that we just calculate, and the difference between it is $110. That's the difference between the revenue guarantee and the revenue to count. Do you get paid that amount? No. Nope. Again, why not?
Maximum $75.60.
Yeah. The maximum payment is $75.60, which we calculated earlier, and you take the lesser of the two values. And in this case, it's $75.60, and we plug it into our formula right there. Again, you multiply it times the 550 base acres of corn. Even though you plant 800, you're only going to get paid on the base of 550. And you multiply that together times the 85%, payments $35,342 and change. Again, this number here, that doesn't change. That's in statutes, in the law. Once you establish your base, after you've updated or not updated in February, then it's locked in too. That won't change during the life of the farm bill. Those numbers are locked in. Excuse me.
I have a question.
Yes.
You got 100% corn-based example, you only get paid 85% of the 75-60 or 75-60 actual?
The 75-60 is multiplied times the base acres, and this farm has 450 acres of soybean base too. It's 550. If you look back up at the farm list, it has 550 acres of corn base, 450 of soybean base. It's not 100% corn base. And the 75-60 payment per acre is times the base acres times 85%. The 85% is in law.
But if you're a 100-acre farm, it is 100% corn based.
Well, then
you get 85% net.
yeah, well, we'll say it'd be the same formula. Let's say it was all there was no wheat base. I mean, no soybean base here. If it was all corn, you'd have 1,000 acres of corn base. Is what you'd have. And rather than 550, you'd multiply times 1,000 acres. The 75-60 times 1,000 acres, but you'd still multiply that number times 85%. 85% is in the law. It does not change. Okay? At this point, I'm going to let you go ahead on your own and work through the soybean numbers. Again, it works the same as the corn. You just have to go through and plug in the numbers. And if you want a check figure, you might write that number down and maybe the total down. And if you later go home and decide to go ahead and finish out the soybean numbers to see if you can do that on your own, at least you'll have a number that you should come to. In addition to that, this is also on videotape on the Ag Manager website, and you can go through it step by step at your own speed. Okay? All right, let's move on to ARC individual. Same farm, ARC individual coverage. It's a little different because they use, in this case, it's Olympic average revenue. Before it was Olympic average price times Olympic average yield. The way this works is that, again, the 355 is below the reference price of 370. So we replace the 355 number with 370, and we multiply it times the 200 bushels that the farmer produced. And that's your yield. It's not the county yield. That's a national price, but it's your individual farm yield. And you multiply 370 times 200, and that gets you a revenue of that year of $740. We did get it right on that one. It is the producer yield, okay? And then we go down to the, we have these 5 revenue values. And when we do it, well, first of all, let me talk about right here. In this year, in 2012, he didn't plant any corn on this farm serial number that he's enrolling or electing for. And so in that year, you get the higher of 70% of the T yield or the county yield. In this case, the county yield is higher, so you plug in 120 bushels there. And the 120 is multiplied times the $6.89, and that will give you a value of $826. Here's the point. If you're going to go to this individual coverage, you want to plant the crop every year. Because if you don't plant the crop, they're going to plug in the county yield. And you do that very many times, and all of a sudden you're going to be the county yield. And to really utilize this program, you need yields higher than what the county are, in most cases. I won't say that's true in every case, but 99% of the cases, you're going to need to be higher than what the county yield is. And so if you are constantly plugging in the county yield, eventually you become the county yield, okay? So you definitely want to plant every year. Probably most appeal will be to people with production above average. And be careful with that one, because I know everybody in the room is above average, but you better compare your actual numbers, which you can get from your crop insurance records, with what comes out of these numbers, which are now posted. And on top of that, you probably need to run it through one of these computer models to make sure you don't get some surprises on how things are allocated. Anyway, we throw out the high, and that's pretty easy. That's the $1,181, right? That's the high revenue. The low revenue is the $564. Yeah, do you like that distribution of revenues? Well, it could certainly be better because the high revenue is in 2011, and you'll have it in the data set for the first 3 years of the Farm Bill, but not for the last 2, right? Because it's in 2011, so it's going to drop out after 3 years. We don't lose the low revenue this year. We won't lose that until next year, which is 2010. And we don't know what the revenue is coming in. Now, by March 1st, we'll have a good estimate of this price number here for 2014. You will already know your 2014 yield. So at that point, you will be able to calculate what the payment is for your farm, unlike the ARC County, where we don't know the county yield until April. So you can do the rest. I can't seem to get in the right spot here. Anyway, you do the same with the soybeans, calculate the revenues for each year, throw out the high and low, and we come up with $463 for the soybeans, $715 for the corn. Here's the problem. You can't get paid more than what you have base. He has 1,200 acres planted, but he's only got 1,000 acres of base. So they prorate the shares between the 2 crops. And this is where this program gets really nasty and complicated. But they prorate the shares. So to prorate the shares, he planted 800 acres of corn, and we divide that with the 1,200 acres of program crops that were planted. 1,200 total. Remember, he only has 1,000 acres of base. We multiply or divide that, and we get 67%. So this is how we're going to weight corn and how we're going to weight the soybeans. So it's this weighted number. First of all, we got to weight the benchmark revenue. So it's 67% times the gross benchmark revenue, which is $715. We take 67% of that, and the weighted benchmark revenue for the corn is $477. Do the same with the soybeans, and we end up with a total adjusted benchmark revenue that's combined for corn and soybeans of $631.64. And as you can see, it's been prorated back to shares between these 2 crops. Now, that's going to change every year. Next year, if you plant in this farm 600 acres of corn and 600 acres of soybeans, what are these numbers going to be? They're going to be 50% at that point. Or if you really up the soybean acres to say 750 and plant 250 of corn, then your corn's going to be 25% and soybeans going to be 75%. So it'll change every year. So you are, by the way you plant, determining your coverage level and type of coverage. Because all these numbers are going to change every year. You'll have to report all this to FSA, so you're going to have to go, you're going to spend a lot of time at FSA's office updating these yields and updating what you planted to determine what your guarantee is going to be if you go the individual route. Now, I don't see any way that this could be interpreted as meeting the guidelines of WTO, these World Trade Agreements, because the government program is influencing what gets planted in this case. But I also have no doubt that some lawyer can't twist that to fit whatever they want it to fit. For example, you, as ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I assure you that my client did not shoot the victim. However, at the end of the trial, you discover that he did shoot him. It will be clear to you that bastard needed killing. And that's how lawyers can argue anything. And I'm sure there's a way to argue this one too. But from an economic standpoint, I don't see any way that this is a decoupled payment because what you plant determines your guarantee. Unlike ARC County and PLC, what you plant does not matter. On this program, it does. Okay? So be aware of that. You need to plant every year if you're going to go this route. Okay. We then take the combined weighted revenue and multiply it times 86% to get our guarantee of 543. Now that's a weighted guarantee, weighted by crop, the ratio between the crops. Excuse me. No, it's going to be fun right now. Take 10% of the reference revenue of 543, right? Just like we did before. And that gives us our maximum payment for this farm, $63.16. Unlike the other one, it's based on county numbers, where everybody in the county would have the same maximum payment. The maximum payment here is going to be by farm. And it will vary from farm to farm depending on what ratio of crops they planted and how high their yields are. Now, you're going to have the same national price, but you won't have the same yields and you won't have the same ratios. So that number will be different for every farmer. Okay, once we have this revenue, we then calculate the revenue produced to come up with the revenue to count against the guaranteed, and you'll notice that we're using 360, which is again a price that's made up for this example. We won't know that number till the 1st of October. The 360 is not a forecast, but the 165 bushels is the actual production raised on the farm. So this farmer raised 165 bushels of corn, and he raised 25 bushels on this farm. Now again, by farm I mean farm serial number. If you sign up more than one farm serial number into the acre program, then they combine all the crops together from both farm serial numbers. Again, the other farms, the other programs are all by farm serial number. You can do one thing on one farm serial number and something totally different on the next. But in this program, if you sign up more than one farm serial number, now you can sign up one of your farm serial numbers in Ark County, you can sign another one in PLC, and you can sign the third one into the individual. But if you sign two of them in the individual, then it's going to combine the crops and the revenues from both farms. Okay? Another way that, well, the fact is, if you're diversified, this probably won't work as well for you as it would for who? Where did the program come from? Well, this actually came from Montana. What do they raise in Montana? Wheat. Summer fallow wheat. So they're planting wheat every year. And of course their argument too is the counties are too big out there. There's some truth to that. I'm not sure that's the whole story. But they're planting wheat every year. So right away, you don't have what we talked about earlier. You need to plant the crop every year so that you don't end up with the county yield, assuming that you're higher than the county. I don't think you go here unless you are. So that goes away. It's a single enterprise farm, so if the wheat fails, there's payments. If you're diversified, you've got wheat, you've got soybeans, and you've got corn. One of the crops comes out bad. If the other two make enough, you can eliminate the payment. So diversification works against you in this program. All right. Anyway, we calculate all the revenue to count, and we come up with the gross revenue of $594 for the corn and $250 for the soybeans. Okay? Now, we got to go back and weight these, just like we did with the guarantee. So we're going to apply the weight for the corn. So the $595, which is the gross revenue to count, comes down here, and we take 67% of this number, and the weighted corn revenue to count is the $396. Take a third of the $250, and we got $83.33 of weighted revenue that's going to count from the soybeans, and you total it together. So the total revenue to count is $479, and at that point, we plug in our guarantee, which is 86% of the reference revenue, which is $543, and we subtract from it this weighted revenue to count that we just generated, and you get 63.83 or 63.88. Do you get 63.88? Almost. Remember what our maximum payment was? It was 63.16. So the 63.16 is just slightly lower than the calculated value. So we're stopped out with a 10% stop loss again. Now you multiply it times the combined base of corn and soybeans. We had 550 acres of corn and 450 of soybean base. So we combine them together, makes it 1,000 acres. So it's the combined base. And this number right here, you know, before that was 85%, it's 65 here. And that's in statute, will not change. So there's two key values in this from the other program. Number one, rather than getting paid on 85% of the base acres, you only get paid on 65%, and you still got that 10% stop loss in there. So those are things that really weigh in on this. Take away the 85 and the 65% number, eliminate the 10% stop loss, eliminate the $125,000 payment limit, and what have you got? You've got crop insurance with an 86% revenue guarantee and no premium. How many of you would like that? Absolutely. No, you wouldn't. 86 not high enough. We need to raise that up to 96%. Yeah. That's too high in Texas, not high enough here. Yeah. But yes, why don't we do that? The cost would become really, really large. When you're in an area where you pay really high premiums, they don't buy the maximum coverage. When you get in the southern states, most of them are at 70%. You find a few at 75. It's rare to find people at 80. So it really changes as you go across the country, the level people buy. And the reason is while they talk about crop insurance subsidy, in fact, I object to that. It effectively is a cost share program, and you're paying a share of the premium, the government's paying a share of the premium. It's the way this thing really works. Does it feel like a subsidy when you're writing premium checks for crop insurance? And you can write those premium checks up in this part of the world maybe 10 years in a row and never get a dime. And then if you do have a big disaster, you could easily have a claim of $500,000 or more. Well, this is capped out at 125. That isn't going to make you anywhere close to whole. Yeah, so when you work through, those changes would have to come about in order for it to be an effective risk management tool that would replace the insurance program. I don't anticipate that it will happen just because of the cost. But I've seen crazier things. I don't rule anything out. Anyway, when you multiply through, the payment under this is $41,056. And obviously that individual one is the one that will be the most difficult to understand, explain to your landlords, etc.